Have you heard, beloved? Have you read that the day of the Lord is coming? A day of darkness, a day of gloom, a day of distress that will come upon all the nations. All the earth will be affected. It's a day when the Antichrist will take his throne. It is a day that will last for 3.5 years. And what precedes that day? It's apostasy. And how can you and I know God so well that we will not turn from Him in the time of testing? God is so good. He is so compassionate and gracious. He's not going to all of a sudden hit us with something so that we are just left spinning and we don't know what has taken place because there's been no warning. When you and I go to Daniel chapter 11 and 12, and we look at this final vision and this understanding that God gives Daniel of the time of the end and what leads up to it, what he does is he shows us in picture form what is going to happen at the end times by giving us a preview, so to speak, a preview through Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, this is who we have been looking at. His name is not mentioned in the book of Daniel, but he was a ruler who was to come. And although God did not give us his name as he gave Israel the name of Cyrus, he still gave us a description of this man. I mean, he put up all the stats so that we could see what he was going to be like. But he also showed us one other thing that is so important, and that is that before the day of the Lord comes, there is going to be a great apostasy. Now, what do I mean by apostasy? Apostasy, an apostate, is a person who once, let's take this pillow, who once embraced something, embraced it, held to it, said it's true, said it's right, lived by it, and then all of a sudden they turn from it, they throw it away, and they walk in the opposite direction. And this is what you see described for us so clearly in Daniel chapter 11. Now, I told you that Daniel 11:32b, the second part of the verse, is one of my favorite verses. And many times when I'm signing whatever for people, I will share this. I don't always sign the same verse because God leads me to give different verses. But let's look at Daniel 11:32. Daniel 11, verse 31. It says, forces from him, from Antiochus, will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress. Now remember, that's when they put up the statue of Zeus, do away with the regular sacrifice. This is what we studied in detail in Daniel 8. So if you don't remember it, go back and review it. And it says, and they will set up the abomination of desolation, which is a statue of Zeus. That's what I want you to remember. And by smooth words, he will turn to godlessness. By smooth words, he, Antiochus Epiphanes, will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant. Now, to act wickedly toward the covenant means that these were Jews. They once embraced the covenant. They once held to that covenant. They said the law is the law and we are to live by it. But now they act wickedly against the covenant because in essence what they're doing is they're flinging truth to the ground. They're getting rid of it. They're saying, oh no, we don't hold that anymore. Look at the United States of America. At one time, this nation, the nation that had the Declaration of Independence, the nation that had the same Constitution, same Declaration that you and I have, taught their children how to read by teaching them the Ten Commandments. What have we done? We have apostatized, and we have thrown that aside, and we have said it does not matter, and this is not what our forefathers want us to believe. That is Tommy rot. It is straight out of the pit of hell. But people have acted wickedly toward the covenant. Now watch what it says. It says, but, I love it, the contrast. The people who know their God will display strength and take action. And those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many. Yet they will fall by sword and by flame. Yet some of them will die. By captivity and by plunder for many days. In other words, it's going to be war. And in war, beloved, there are always casualties. It says, now when they fall, they will be granted a little help. And many will join them in hypocrisy. In other words, they'll come along and they'll say, here, let me help you. But they really don't want to help them. They're hypocrites. A hypocrite is a person that wears a mask. When you went into the theaters of those days, those Greek theaters, and the people sat so far away and they didn't have television cameras and big screens, in order to show the emotion, they would hold up a mask with a sad face, or they would put it down and they would wear a mask with a happy face. So that's what a hypocrite is. A hypocrite is a two-faced person. It's a person that wears two different masks that are contrary to one another. So they're going to come along, but in hypocrisy. And it goes on to say, and some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine and purge and make them pure until the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time. So I would put a time phrase over appointed time, and I would color the end time red. What he's just told you is, hey, this is not the end. This is not the end. I'm not a God that sneaks up on you. I have just given you a preview of things to come so that I might teach you, so that you might write it down, so that you might learn and you might be instructed for that great and terrible day of the Lord, which is coming upon the whole earth. A time like this world has never, ever seen. Now, let me go back and show you what happened. What happened in this time? Remember, it was the Greek period, and Antiochus Epiphanes was a Greek ruler. He was ruler. He was the king of the north. Well, after he went back, after he desecrated the sanctuary, and he went home, he sent his soldiers throughout the land to gather the people to make sacrifices to the gods, not to our God. And so he was going through, and one of the men, and he got to the town of Modin. Now Modin, I love it, I've been there. Modin is between Jerusalem, it's halfway between Jerusalem and Joppa. And he goes into this town of Modin, and all the people are required to come. And there is an altar that this man has put up, and they are going to sacrifice an animal on this altar. Now this is forbidden to the Jews. And they call Mattathias, and Mattathias is an older man. He has 5 sons, and they say to him, you will sacrifice on this altar. And he looks at that soldier of Antiochus Epiphanes, and he says, no, I will not. And this young Jewish man steps up, and he says, I'll do it. Now you talk about apostasy. Here's a Jewish man. He has an example of a godly older man, but, you know, he's young. He knows it all. He wants to be part of it. This new government, this new regime, this new Hellenistic culture and empire. I'll do it. And so Mattathias reaches in under his robe. That old guy, I love him. He pulls out a knife and he kills the young Jewish boy, and he kills Antiochus's soldier. His sons rise up, 5 of them, and they rise up and they flee to the caves, and others join them. And what you have is you have the Maccabean revolt. And 3 years, as I told you earlier, 3 years after that statue of Zeus is put up, it comes down broken and dragged out of that temple, and that temple is cleansed, and you have the celebration of Hanukkah. How did that come about? The people who know their God will be strong, and they will take action. Now, Mattathias was too old to run this group, so his son, Judas, steps up, and they called him Judas Maccabeus. Maccabeus means the hammer, and man, was he skilled at guerrilla kind of warfare. I mean, he was superior at it. And along came these Hasidim, and the Hasidim, or Hasidim, however you want to pronounce it, were the religious Jews that kept the law, that embraced the law, that did not cast it away, that did not apostatize. And they said, we are standing with you. And so they became part of that force. But once the temple was set up, and once temple worship was restored, and we have this period of independence that lasts from 167 to 63 BC. So it's a little bit over 100 years when the Jews are ruling their own land. And then what happens? Well, you remember I told you. The ships from Kittim, Rome, that said to AE, Antiochus Epiphanes, you're not going to take Egypt. Now Rome rules over Israel. And it's because of all sorts of corruption. If you have the New Inductive Study Bible, go to the back and read the history. It is absolutely fascinating. If you have an Apocrypha, which, it's full of stories, it's not biblical, but it has the book of Maccabees in it. And so you might want to read those two books and just catch what is happening. It's not the verbally inspired Word of God, but it's like a history book. It's like an account. Or you could read Josephus. And Josephus, there's the essential writings of Josephus. It's condensed and it's in good English and it's easy to understand. And it's fascinating to read about this intertestament period. Now watch the awesome thing that happens in this chapter. In verse 36, it says, then the king will do as he pleases, and he will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things about the God of God, and he will prosper until, time phrase, the indignation is what? Finished, completed, over. For that which is decreed will be done. What happens between verse 35 and verse 36 is monumental. Because what happens is this. We move from an end of a historical account of what, of course, is coming in the future, because this was written before it ever happened. But we come to the end of that, and from verse 36 all the way through the end of chapter 12 of Daniel, what we have, beloved, is we have something that has no historical fulfillment. Now, remember, I was showing you in days past how God has told us what is going to come to pass so that we know it. And when He lays it out with accuracy. Everything has come to pass up to this point, but this hasn't. Does that mean that this is false? No, it means that it is future. And what does the future hold? We'll talk about it right after we come back.
We spent 3.5 hours on the Word today, and it flew by because we're doing so much in observing so many different parts of the text. It changed my life and helped me own my faith instead of depending on people for my faith. So I would strongly encourage anybody who's even considering it or has thought about it, please come, because it'll change your life.
Go to precept.org/bootcamp to register today.
I've heard it a lot that people think that people won't be interested in studying the Bible, or they're not interested in this thing. It's just going to be impossible to get them to want to do something like this. And you know what? I think that's a really common thought, because our generation is so used to entertainment and immediate results, and it's hard to get them to sit down to do anything. But I think this generation is also lacking truth. They're lacking the ability to understand things for themselves, and they're tired of listening to what everyone else has to say, and they really want to understand for themselves, but they don't realize that that's what they're looking for. So I think once this is something that if they can sit down long enough for this to be introduced to them, that they can see the immediate benefits for doing that. I think that it's something that this generation wants and they do need. And I think it's just that we don't give them enough credit to try to sit them down long enough to do it.
Discover truth for yourself through the Precept Inductive Bible Study Method.
You start seeing how this book relates to this book, and this book relates to that book. And it allows you to not only see the picture of salvation, the history of Israel, the future, whatever the future holds, but it also really allows you to know your God and His heart for you. You start having a personal relationship and a deeper relationship and a better understanding of why you believe what you believe.
Discover truth for yourself through the Precept Inductive Bible Study Method.
I'm glad you're back, beloved. What we want to do is we want to see now the shadow that Antiochus, either way, you can pronounce it both ways, that he is cast as a forerunner of the Antichrist. As a forerunner, now listen carefully, of the little horn of Daniel chapter 7. Remember, the little horn is the horn that comes out of the fourth empire. The fourth empire is the one that is existing when Jesus Christ comes and establishes His kingdom on the earth. It is an empire that was, that is not, and that is again. So it's different than the other three that precede it. In Daniel chapter 2, what did we see? We saw an image of a statue. A head of gold represented Babylon. We know now that the chest of silver represented the Medo-Persian Empire. We know that the bronze represented the Grecian Empire. And then the legs and the feet, made of iron, and then the feet of iron and clay, represented the Roman Empire. In the days of those 10 kings, those 10 toes of the statue, the God of heaven sets up a kingdom. He sends a stone cut without hands, and showing that it is not man's kingdom. He crushes the statue on the feet. All of it collapses, and He sets up His kingdom, which lasts forever and ever. In Daniel chapter 7, we saw the parallel to that. We saw 4 beasts that come out of the sea. The first beast was a lion, and it was like the head of gold. It represented Babylon. The second beast was a bear raised up on one side, a parallel to the Medo-Persian Empire, the silver of the chest of the statue in Daniel chapter 2. The third beast that we saw was like a leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings on its back, showing the speed of the Grecian Empire and being the equivalent of the bronze on the statue. The fourth beast was a dreadful and terrifying beast. It was different from all the others, different in that it was going to exist then, it was going to fade away, and it was going to come back into power. What we are about to look at is in Daniel chapter 11, verse 36, is we're about to look at the ruler of that fourth empire at the very end of time. Now we know that that fourth beast is dreadful and terrifying, and it has iron teeth, and it crushes and it tramples down all the rest. We know that it has 10 horns on its head. We know that a little horn comes up among those 10. He takes out 3 of the horns. He conquers those. He has the eyes of a man and a mouth uttering great boasts. We know that that little horn becomes a ruler, and from Daniel chapter 7, those last verses, we know that he magnifies and he exalts himself as God, and he seeks to change seasons and times, and he tramples down and rules over the whole earth and over the saints for time and half a time, which is 3.5 years. When we get to Daniel 8, we know that that chest of silver, which is also exemplified as the bear, is the ram with two horns, one longer being the other. And God tells us at that point that that is the Medo-Persian Empire. When we look at the statue and we see the belly of bronze, we see the equivalent of that in Daniel chapter 7 is this leopard. And when we get to Daniel chapter 8, God tells us specifically that this is the kingdom of Greece. He tells us all of those. When we get to Daniel chapter 9, we know because Israel is conquered and destroyed and the temple is destroyed by the Roman Empire in 70 AD by Titus, the Roman general. We know at that time that the fourth kingdom is Rome. Now we're going and we're looking, we're in the times of the Gentiles, as I have taught you. Now he's taking us to the very end of time, to just before the day of the Lord, and including the day of the Lord, so that we can see God setting up his kingdom. So Daniel chapter 11, verse 36, all the way through verse 45 describes to you now the Antichrist, the one who is the little horn of Daniel, the one who magnifies himself as God. All right, let's look at it. Daniel 11:36. He will do as he pleases. He exalts and magnifies himself above every god. He speaks monstrous things against the God of gods. In other words, against the God of heaven. And it says, and he will prosper until the indignation is finished. So you can know this, that little horn of Daniel is going to continue to prosper and expand his kingdom until the indignation is finished. And then what you see is you see the fulfillment of Daniel 9, the one that causes horror will be absolutely destroyed. Desolations are determined on him. So it says in verse 37, he will show no regard for the God of his fathers or for the desire of women. Now, the desire of women in Jewish thinking is every woman desired to be the mother of Messiah. So when they talk about the desire of women, it was the desire to have Messiah. So it could be that he has no desire for Messiah whatsoever, which in a way may indicate that there's some Jewishness in this man. We don't know exactly. But it says, and he, in verse 37, nor will he show regard for any other God. In other words, this man is a pure atheist, for he will magnify himself above all. He's an atheist except when it comes to him, and he looks at himself as God. But instead, he will honor a God of fortresses. This is a man of war, a God whom his fathers did not know. He will honor him with gold, silver, costly stone, and treasures. In other words, this God of fortresses is something that he buys. It's something that is of power. And he will take action against the strongest of fortresses with the help of a foreign god. And he will give great honor to those who acknowledge him. Now, this is exactly what Antiochus Epiphanes did. He will cause them to rule over the many, and he will parcel out land for a price. You want to rule over that part or that territory? Then give me money. You know, it's everything is money, because he's a God of fortresses. He's got this costly stones. He's got these jewels, etc. Verse 40. Now he's taking us through this rule to the end time. At the end time, and you mark this in red, the king of the south will collide with him, and the king of the north will storm against him with chariots. Ooh, what have you just found out? He has just told you that he is not Syrian and he is not Egyptian, but he is the ruler that has come up in this fourth empire. And now you have Syria colliding with him. You have Egypt colliding with him. And they will storm against him with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. And he will enter countries and overflow them and pass through. I mean, he'll just take them over. He will also enter the beautiful land. Now, the beautiful land was first mentioned in Daniel chapter 8, verse 9. Then it was mentioned in Daniel chapter 11. Now it's being mentioned again in Daniel chapter 11. He will enter the beautiful land, Israel. Many countries will fall, but these will be rescued out of his hand. This is so interesting. Edom, Moab, and the foremost sons of Ammon. If you were to go to the east of the Dead Sea, and you were to go north and you were to go south, what country would be over there today? Present day Jordan. So when he's making his conquest, for some reason, we know that Jordan escapes out of his hand. In other words, he doesn't demolish Jordan and or Ammon, Moab, and Edom. It says, then he will stretch out his hand against other countries, and the land of Egypt will not escape. What is he doing? He is going forth conquering and to conquer. He will gain control over the hidden treasures of gold and silver and over all the precious things of Egypt. And Libyans and Ethiopians will follow at his heels. I mean, he'll just take that part of northern Africa, and they will just follow him. And it says, but rumors from the east. Now, what's the east? Iraq? Rumors from the east and from the north. And north is beyond Syria. What's up there? Russia. Will disturb him. And he will go forth with great wrath to destroy and annihilate many. I mean, this is a man going forth to conquer, going forth to conquer. This is this kingdom, I mean, showing itself, taking over, and this is the little horn. Now remember, that kingdom has 10 horns. That kingdom has 10 kings. Some are weak and some are strong, as we saw in Daniel chapter 2 and in Daniel chapter 7. But those 10 align themselves with this little horn. He takes out 3. He takes out 3, and it's apparently because they don't cooperate. Verse 45, and he will pitch his tents, the tents of his royal pavilion, between the seas and the beautiful holy mountain. Now, what do you have? Israel is on the Mediterranean Sea. Israel has the Dead Sea. He's going to pitch his tent between those two and the beautiful holy mountain. What is there? That's Jerusalem. What is going to happen? I cannot wait to tell you in our next session. It is the time of the end and the apostasy.
Thank you for watching today. All the programs you see on Precepts for Life are available on CD and DVD. Join us for our next program as Kay shares more Precepts for Life.